Look to Dr. Jessica Carbino to close the case for the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, before I begin, I would like to quickly Insta, tweet, post, and snap that I'm here with you all tonight. I'm very excited to be here. I hope that this will not corrupt our interactions and that afterwards you guys can come up and have a quick conversation with me. On a more serious note, I would like to say that it is an honor here tonight to be before you all discussing this very important issue in the company of such august speakers. This esteemed institution puts forth the motion, argued very eloquently by members of the proposition that social media corrupts human interactions. I must disagree, however, and urge us first to consider that arguments related to the potentially corrupting effects of technology, not only on human interactions, but the human condition, have dated back to the introduction of paper. While paper cuts were certainly cause for concern back in the time of Socrates, he was more focused on individuals not relying on their own memories, but rather on the written word to construct their understanding of events. We see this trend in resistance towards and concerns about technology persist over time with the printing press, newspapers, the automobile, the telephone, and the television. The telephone is actually a very interesting and, dare I say, entertaining example of the extent to which people believed that technological innovation could corrupt human interaction. Following the introduction of the telephone, many speculated that people would be able to communicate with the dead. I would like to add, however, that this was before the introduction of the Psychic Friends Network in the United States. I understand that the telephone is obviously a quite extreme example, but it's illustrative of how technology can have such deleterious outcomes potentially in the minds of the public. The argument in this motion that social media corrupts human interactions, I believe, would have been made regarding all of the aforementioned innovations. However, no one, including myself, could reasonably argue that innovation doesn't lead to change and that there are not consequences to those changes. Rather than calling our parents, well, maybe not my parents, but other people's parents, we might now send a text or an email to communicate with one another. However, the degree of the consequences and the use of the word corrupt to describe the effects of social media on human interactions is too short-sighted and too far-reaching. Given the persistence and continued functioning of dominant social institutions, in the face of technological innovation and change, I believe that this motion simply reflects an overreaction to changes in interaction and the continued indictment of technology on human interaction. Although it's interesting and compelling to think about the existence of resistance to innovation and change, I believe it's equally important and critical to try to understand the underlying causes. The resistance to technological change and innovation is primarily driven by two factors. First, innovations create change in day-to-day life. Resistance to new technologies for many is rooted in how innovation may disrupt their routines and thereby the status quo. Second, the perceived risks associated with the changes are what contribute to resistance to innovation. That is what has been argued here tonight by members of the proposition, suggesting that social media corrupts human interactions. While Mr. Simons makes a very interesting and compelling argument about how people's lives and worldview and body image can be changed by how they consume social media, I would like to bring us back to our idealization of the body, beginning with Francisco de Goya and the David, and how we think about fairy tales in our lives. This examination between the historically negative perceptions regarding technology and change, however, doesn't account for what I would like to argue regarding how social media, rather than corrupting, expands the scope of potential human interactions. Social media, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, of course, is defined as websites and applications that enable users to create and share content or to participate in social networking. Social media is broadly defined and provides us with the ability to do so much more than tweet, Insta, post, and snap that we are here this evening, as I mentioned prior. Today, social media applications allow us to participate in an open market whereby we can exchange organs with someone who may be a match for ourselves or for a loved one, and vice versa. We have the capacity to submit content to a website or to an app and have a dialogue with people just like ourselves or with celebrities and notable figures. Or we can stream live videos of national sporting events or sit-ins by members of Congress on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. These are limited examples, but illustrate the ability of social media to connect us to a world beyond our existing social contacts. Until the rise of social media, meeting an individual outside of one's existing social circle was incredibly challenging. In fact, one of the primary reasons individuals turn to online dating is the capacity to meet people whom they otherwise would have never had the opportunity to meet. In fact, in the United States, online dating has become the #1 way individuals meet their romantic partner. The ability to meet people outside of the existing social circle is important not only from a romantic perspective, but from an intellectual, cultural, and social perspective as well. The ability to understand those around us and not be tied to our own view and worldview allows for a robust exchange of ideas and furthers our understanding of those who may have a very different life experience from our own. The ability to understand the life and experiences of people who are different from us has a long been a function of technology, but especially has been seen in social media. Historically, Americans learned about the injustices and horrific acts of discrimination occurring in the American South in the 1950s and 1960s by watching television. Today, we see the realities of police brutality appearing on a variety of social media platforms as documented by our smartphones. Social media is truly a powerful tool, not only for documenting and shedding light on the most important social issues of our day, but providing access to information and a platform for individuals, particularly the marginalized. The media is largely controlled by elites, which are not typically in touch with the most marginalized communities, such as ethnic minorities and members of the LGBT community, particularly the transgender community. Through online forums, social networking sites, and apps, communities that have never had access to the microphone have the ability not to only connect with each other, but with the world. Social media has given a voice to the voiceless. This ability to have a microphone has been particularly critical in social movements. The Arab Spring has been cited as an important example on the influence of social media on providing information to mobilize protesters on the ground. Rather than solely a traditional news outlet documenting what was occurring on the ground, the world was able to watch protests in Tahrir Square via the videos that were produced on smartphones and subsequently posted on social media forums. We have therefore transformed from consumers to producers of knowledge. This has a profound impact in terms of how we think about content and the dissemination of information more broadly. To argue that social media is a corrupting force is tantamount to arguing against innovation. It runs contrary to our innate and human instinct to strive, to improve, to innovate, to change, and to grow. Innovation is what transformed us from an agrarian to an industrial to a technological society. While not only anathema to the human spirit, to argue against social media is frankly futile, given the overall difficulty and arguable inability to thwart innovation and change. The wheels of progress will continue to turn, and we must determine how to best harness progress to improve human interactions. There are obviously reasonable questions we can ask regarding social media use, such as when, where, and how much. As with everything in life, whether it be carbs, chocolate, or President Trump's tweets, I would recommend moderation. The effects of social media have implications for the future that are long-term, but not yet fully realized or understood. Social media, rather than corrupting human interactions, has the capacity to enhance our relationships to people whom we know, people whom we do not know, the world with which we are familiar, and areas or aspects of the world with which we are not familiar. I urge this House to consider the long-standing history of fear and scrutiny regarding technological innovation and the broad and compelling impacts of social media on enhancing human interaction and the human condition more broadly via social media when deliberating this motion. Thank you.